Hey everyone, welcome back to our chapter book read-along of Holes by Louis Sachar. So, we have now read chapters 1 through 5, and I want to see how much you remember. So, if you are watching this with someone, pause the video and review what we have read so far. And then here goes my review. Holes is about a boy named Stanley Yelnats. Stanley is not a very lucky guy. He got caught kind of in the middle of something. We don't know yet, but he had to go to a camp for boys who get in trouble. Camp Green Lake. Here's the thing about this camp. There's no green and no lake. Just a big, empty, dry space. So, we learn also a little bit about Stanley Yelnats' family. Stanley Yelnats, the reason he is named that is it's spelled the same way, frontwards and backwards. And he is an only child. He has no siblings. And his father is an inventor. He is trying to invent a way to recycle rubber tennis shoes, so his poor apartment smells like feet. Ew. Also, their family claims to have been cursed by a one-legged gypsy who cursed all of the men in their family. And so whenever something bad happens, usually as a joke, Stanley and his father say that no good pig-stealing, dirty, rotten great-great-grandfather. They also talked a little bit about his other grandfather, his great-great, I think, who got robbed by Kissin' Kate Barlow in the Wild West of Texas. So, back in the present day, we have met a few people that are in charge here at Camp Green Lake. Mr. Sir and Mr. Pendanski. Mr. Pendanski is the counselor of Stanley's tent, Tent D. The boys of Stanley's tent go by some pretty interesting names. X-ray, Magnet, Zigzag, Armpit, Squid, and Zero. The boy who used to be in Stanley's bed was a boy named Barfbag. Well, we have now caught up to where we are in our book. So, let's get started with chapter 6 of Holes. Chapter 6. Stanley took a shower, if you could call it that, ate dinner, if you could call it that, and went to bed, if you could call his smelly, scratchy cot a bed. Because of the scarcity of water, each camper was only allowed a 4-minute shower. It took Stanley nearly that long to get used to the cold water. There was no knob for hot water. He kept stepping into, then jumping back from, the spray until the water shut off automatically. He never managed to use his bar of soap, which was just as well, because he wouldn't have had time to rinse off the suds. Dinner was some kind of stewed meat and vegetables. The meat was brown, and the vegetables had once been green. Everything tasted pretty much the same. He ate it all, and used his slice of white bread to mop up the juice. Stanley had never been one to leave food on his plate, no matter how it tasted. "What'd you do?" one of the campers asked him. At first, Stanley didn't know what he meant. "They sent you here for a reason." "Oh," he realized, "I stole a pair of sneakers." The other boys thought this was funny. Stanley wasn't sure why. Maybe because their crimes were a lot worse than stealing shoes. "From a store, or were they on somebody's feet?" asked Squid. Neither," Stanley answered. "They belonged to Clyde Livingston." Nobody believed him. "Sweet feet?" said X-ray. "Yeah, right." "No way," said Squid. Now, as Stanley lay on his cot, He thought it was kind of funny in a way. Nobody had believed him when he said he was innocent. Now, when he said he stole them, nobody believed him either. Clyde Sweetfeet Livingston was a famous baseball player. He'd led the American League in stolen bases over the last 3 years. He was also the only player in history to ever hit 4 triples in one game. Stanley had a poster of him hanging on the wall of his bedroom. He used to have the poster anyway. He didn't know where it was now. It had been taken by the police and used as evidence of his guilt in the courtroom. Clyde Livingston also came to court. In spite of everything, when Stanley found out that Sweetfeet was going to be there, he was actually excited about the prospect of meeting his hero. Clyde Livingston testified that they were his sneakers and that he had donated them to help raise money for the homeless shelter. He said he couldn't imagine what kind of horrible person would steal from homeless children. That was the worst part for Stanley. His hero thought he was a no-good, dirty, rotten thief. As Stanley tried to turn over in his cot, he was afraid it was going to collapse under his weight. He barely fit in it. When he finally managed to roll over on his stomach, the smell was so bad that he had to turn over again and try sleeping on his back. The cot smelled like sour milk. Though it was night, the air was still very warm. Armpit was snoring 2 cots away. Back at school, a bully named Derek Doone used to torment Stanley. The teachers never took Stanley's complaints seriously because Derek was too much smaller than Stanley. Some teachers even seemed to find it amusing that a little kid like Derek could pick on someone as big as Stanley. On the day Stanley was arrested, Derek had taken Stanley's notebook and after a long game of come and get it, finally dropped it in the toilet of the boys' restroom. By the time Stanley retrieved it, he had missed his bus and had to walk home. It was while he was walking home, carrying his wet notebook with the prospect of having to copy the ruined pages, that the sneakers fell from the sky. "I was walking home and the sneakers fell from the sky," he told the judge. "One hit me on the head." It had hurt, too. They hadn't exactly fallen from the sky. He had just walked out from under a freeway overpass when the shoe hit him on the head. Stanley took it as some kind of sign. His father had been trying to figure out a way to recycle old sneakers, and suddenly a pair of sneakers fell on top of him, suddenly out of nowhere, like a gift from God. Naturally, he had no way of knowing they belonged to Clive Livingston. In fact, the shoes were anything but sweet. Whoever had worn them had a bad case of foot odor. Stanley couldn't help but think that there was something special about the shoes, that they could somehow provide the key to his father's invention. It was too much of a coincidence to be a mere accident. Stanley had felt like he was holding Destiny's shoes. He ran. Thinking back now, he wasn't sure why he ran. Maybe he was in a hurry to bring the shoes to his father, or maybe he was trying to run away from his miserable and humiliating day at school. The patrol car pulled alongside him. A policeman asked him why he was running. Then he took the shoes and made the call on his radio. Shortly thereafter, Stanley was arrested. It turned out the sneakers had been stolen from a display at the homeless shelter. That evening, rich people were going to come to the shelter and pay $100 to eat food that poor people ate every day for free. Clyde Livingston, who had once lived at the shelter when he was younger, was going to speak and sign autographs. His shoes would be auctioned, and it was expected that they would sell for over $5,000. All the money would go to help the homeless. Because of the baseball schedule, Stanley's trial was delayed for several months. His parents couldn't afford a lawyer. "You don't need a lawyer," his mom had said. "Just the truth." Stanley told the truth, but perhaps it would have been better if he lied a little. He could have said he found the shoes on the street. No one believed that they fell from the sky. It wasn't destiny, he realized. It was his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. The judge called Stanley's crime despicable. The shoes were valued at over $5,000. It was money that would provide food and shelter for the homeless. You stole that from them just so you could have a souvenir. The judge said that there was an opening at Camp Green Lake, and he suggested that the discipline of the camp might improve Stanley's character. It was either that or jail. Stanley's parents asked if they could have some time to find out more about Camp Green Lake, but the judge advised them to make a quick decision. Vacancies don't last long at Camp Green Lake. Chapter 7. The shovel fell heavy in Stanley's soft, fleshy hands. He tried to jam it into the earth, but the blade banged against the ground and bounced off without making a dent. The vibrations ran up the shaft of the shovel and into Stanley's wrists, making his bones rattle. It was still dark. The only light came from the moon and the stars, more stars than Stanley had ever seen before. It seemed he had only just gotten to sleep when Mr. Pendanski came in and woke everybody up. Using all his might, he brought the shovel back down into the dry lake bed. The force stung his hands, but made no impression on the earth. He wondered if he had a defective shovel. He glanced at Zero, about 15 feet away, who scooped out a shovelful of dirt and dumped it into a pile that was already almost a foot tall. For breakfast, they'd been served some kind of lukewarm cereal. The best part was the orange juice. They had got a pint carton. The cereal actually didn't taste too bad. It just smelled like his cot. Then they filled their canteens, got their shovels, and were marched out across the lake. Each group was assigned a different area. The shovels were kept in a shed near the showers. They all looked the same to Stanley, although X-Ray had his own special shovel, which no one else was allowed to use. X-Ray claimed it was shorter than the others, but if it was only by a fraction of an inch. The shovels were 5 feet long, from the tip of the steel blade to the end of the wooden shaft. Stanley's hole would have to be as deep as his shovel, and he'd have to be able to lay the shovel flat across the bottom in any direction. That was why X-Ray wanted the shortest shovel. The lake was so full of holes and mounds that it reminded Stanley of pictures he'd seen of the moon. "If you find anything interesting or unusual," Mr. Pendanski had told him, "you should report it to either me or Mr. Sir when we come around with the water truck. If the warden likes what you found, you'll get the rest of the day off." "What are we supposed to be looking for?" Stanley asked him. "You're not looking for anything. You're digging to build character. It's just if you do find anything, the warden would like to know about it." He glanced helplessly at his shovel. It wasn't defective. He was defective. He noticed a thin crack in the ground. He placed the point of his shovel on top of it, then jumped on the back of the blade with both feet. The shovel sank a few inches into the packed earth. He smiled. For once in his life, it paid to be overweight. He leaned on the shaft and pried up his first shovelful of dirt, then dumped it off to the side. "Only 10 million more to go," he thought, then placed the shovel back in the crack and jumped on it again. He unearthed several shovelfuls of dirt in this manner before it occurred to him that he was dumping his dirt within the perimeter of his hole. He laid the shovel flat on the ground and marked where the edges of his hole would be. 5 feet was awfully wide. He moved the dirt he'd already dug up past his mark. He took a drink from his canteen. 5 feet would be awfully deep, too. The digging got easier after a while. The ground was hardest at the surface, where the sun had baked at the crust about 8 inches deep. Beneath that, the earth was looser. But by the time Stanley broke past the crust, a blister had formed in the middle of his right thumb, and it hurt to hold the shovel. Stanley's great-great-grandfather was named Ela Yelnats. He was born in Latvia. When he was 15 years old, he fell in love with Mira Menke. He didn't know he was Stanley's great-great-grandfather. Mira Menke was 14. She would turn 15 in 2 months, at which time her father had decided she should be married. Ela went to her father to ask for her hand, but so did Igor Barkov, a pig farmer. Igor was 57 years old. He had a red nose and fat puffy cheeks. "I will trade you my fattest pig for your daughter," Igor offered. "What have you got?" Mira's father asked Ela. "A heart full of love," said Ela. "I'd rather have a fat pig," said Mira's father. Desperate, Ela went to see Madame Zeroni, an old Egyptian woman who lived at the edge of town. He had become friends with her, though she was quite a bit older than him. She was even older than Igor Barkov. The other boys of his village liked to mud wrestle. Ela preferred visiting Madame Zeroni and listening to her many stories. Madame Zeroni had dark skin and a very wide mouth. When she looked at you, her eyes seemed to expand, and you felt as though she was looking right through you. "Ela, what's wrong?" she asked, before he even told her he was upset. She was sitting in a homemade wheelchair. She had no left foot. Her leg stopped at her ankle. "I'm in love with Mira Menke," Ela confessed, "but Igor Barkov has offered to trade his fattest pig for her. I can't compete with that." "Good," said Madame Zeroni. "You're too young to get married. You have your whole life ahead of you. But I love Mira. Mira's head is as empty as a flower pot. But she is beautiful. So is a flower pot. Can she push a plow? Can she milk a goat? No, she is too delicate. Can she have an intelligent conversation? No, she is silly and foolish. Will she take care of you when you are sick? No, she is spoiled and will only want to take care of herself. So she is beautiful. So what? Pooh!" Madame Zeroni spat in the dirt. She told Ela he should go to America. "Like my son, that's where your future lies, not with Mira Menke." But Ela would hear none of that. He was 15, and all he could see was Mira's shallow beauty. Madame Zeroni hated to see Ela forlorn. Against her better judgment, she agreed to help him. "It just so happens my sow gave birth to a litter of piglets yesterday. There is one little runt whom she won't suckle. You may have him. He would die anyway." Madame Zeroni led Ela around the back of her house, where she kept her pigs. Ela took the tiny piglet, but he didn't see what good it would do him. It wasn't much bigger than a rat. "He'll grow," Madame Zeroni assured him. "Do you see that mountain on the edge of the forest?" "Yes," said Ela. "On the top of the mountain there is a stream where the water runs uphill. You must carry the piglet every day to the top of the mountain, let it drink from the stream. As it drinks, you are to sing to him." She taught Ela a special song to sing to the pig. "On the day of Mira's 15th birthday, you should carry the pig up the mountain for the last time. Then take it directly to Mira's father. It will be fatter than any of Igor's pigs." "If it's that big and fat," said Ela, "how will I be able to carry it up the mountain?" "The piglet is not too heavy for you now, is it?" asked Madame Zeroni. "Of course not," said Ela. "Do you think it will be too heavy for you tomorrow?" "No. Every day you will carry the pig up the mountain. It will get a little bigger, but you will get a little stronger. After you give the pig to Mira's father, I want you to do the same thing for me." "Anything," said Ela. "I want you to carry me up the mountain. I want to drink from the stream, and I want you to sing the song to me." Ela promised he would. Madame Zeroni warned that if he failed to do this, he and his descendants would be doomed for all eternity. At the time, Ela thought nothing of the curse. He was just a 15-year-old kid, and eternity didn't seem much longer than a week from Tuesday. Besides, he liked Madame Zeroni, and he would be glad to carry her up the mountain. He would have done it right then and there, but he wasn't yet strong enough. Stanley was still digging. His hole was about 3 feet deep, but only in the center. It sloped upward to the edges. The sun had just come out over the horizon, but he already could feel the hot rays against his face. As he reached down to pick up his canteen, he felt a sudden rush of dizziness and put his hands on his knees to steady himself. For a moment, he was afraid he would throw up, but the moment passed. He drank the last drop of water from his canteen. He had blisters on every one of his fingers, and one in the center of each palm. Everyone else's hole was a lot deeper than his. He couldn't actually see their holes, but he could tell by the size of their dirt piles. He saw a cloud of dust moving across the wasteland and noticed the other boys had stopped digging and were watching it too. The dirt cloud moved closer. He could see that it trailed behind a red pickup truck. The truck stopped near where they were digging. The boys lined up behind it. X-ray in front, Zero at the rear. Stanley got in line behind Zero. Mr. Sir filled each of their canteens from a tank of water at the bed of the pickup. As he took Stanley's canteen from him, he said, "This ain't Girl Scouts, is it?" Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. Mr. Sir followed Stanley back to his hole to see how he was doing. "You better get with it," he said, "or else you're going to be digging in the hottest part of the day." He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth, deftly removed the shells with his teeth, and spat them into Stanley's hole. Every day, Ela carried the little piglet up the mountain and sang to it as it drank from the stream. As the pig grew fatter, Ela grew stronger. On the day of Mira's 15th birthday, Ela's pig weighed over 50 stones. Madame Zeroni had told him to carry the pig up the mountain on the day as well, but Ela didn't want to present himself to Mira smelling like a pig. Instead, he took a bath. It was his second bath in less than a week. Then he led the pig to Mira's. Igor Barkov was there with his pig as well. "Those are 2 of the finest pigs I've ever seen," Mira's father declared. He was also impressed with Ela, who seemed to have grown bigger and stronger in the last 2 months. "I used to think you were a good-for-nothing book reader," he said, "but I see now you can be an excellent mud wrestler." "May I marry your daughter?" Ela boldly asked. "First, I must weigh the pigs." Alas, poor Ela should have carried his pig up the mountain one last time. The 2 pigs weighed exactly the same. Stanley's blisters had ripped open, and new blisters had formed. He kept changing his grip on the shovel to try to avoid the pain. Finally, he removed his cap and held it between the shaft of his shovel and his raw hands. This helped, but digging was harder because the cap would slip and slide. The sun beat down on his unprotected head and neck. Though he tried to convince himself otherwise, he'd been aware for a while that his piles of dirt were too close to his hole. The piles were outside his 5-foot circle, but he could see he was going to run out of room. Still, he pretended otherwise and kept adding more dirt to the piles that he would eventually have to move. The problem was that when the dirt was in the ground, it was compacted. It expanded when it was excavated. The piles were a lot bigger than his hole was deep. It was either now or later. Reluctantly, he climbed out of his hole, once again dug his shovel into the previously dug dirt. Mira's father got down on his hands and knees and closely examined each pig, tail to snout. "Those are 2 of the finest pigs I have ever seen," he said at last. "How am I to decide? I have only one daughter." "Why not let Mira decide?" suggested Ela. "That's preposterous!" exclaimed Igor, expelling saliva as he spoke. "Mira is just an empty-headed girl," said her father. How can she possibly decide when I, her father, can't?" "She knows how she feels in her heart," said Ela. Mira's father rubbed his chin. Then he laughed and said, "Why not?" He slapped Ela on the back. "It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig." He summoned his daughter. Ela blushed when Mira entered the room. "Good afternoon, Mira," he said. She looked at him. "You're Ela, right?" she asked. "Mira," said her father, "Ela and Igor have each offered a pig for your hand in marriage. It doesn't matter to me, a pig is a pig, so I will let you make the choice. Whom will you marry?" Mira looked confused. "You want me to decide?" "That's right, my blossom," said her father. "Gee, I don't know," said Mira. "Which pig weighs more?" "They both weigh the same," said her father. "Golly," said Mira, "I guess I choose Ela. No Igor. No Ela. No Igor. I don't know. I'll think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll marry whoever guesses the closest number. Okay, I'm ready." 10, guessed Igor. Ela said nothing. "Ela," said Mira, "what number do you guess?" Ela didn't pick a number. "Marry Igor," he muttered. "You can keep my pig as a wedding present." The next time the water truck came in, it was driven by Mr. Pendanski, who also brought sack lunches. Stanley sat with his back against a pile of dirt and ate. He had a bologna sandwich, potato chips, and a large chocolate chip cookie. "How you doing?" asked Magnet. "Not real good," said Stanley. "Well, the first hole's the hardest," Magnet said. Stanley took a long, deep breath. He couldn't afford to dawdle. He was way behind the others, and the sun just kept getting hotter. It wasn't even noon yet, but he didn't know if he had the strength to stand up. He thought about quitting. He wondered what they would do to him. What could they do to him? His clothes were soaked with sweat. In school, he had learned that sweating was good for you. It's nature's way of keeping you cool. So why was he so hot? Using a shovel for support, he managed to get to his feet. "Where are we supposed to go to the bathroom?" he asked Magnet. Magnet gestured with his hands to the great expanse around them. "Pick a hole, any hole," he said. Stanley staggered across the lake, almost falling over a dirt pile. Behind him, he heard Magnet say, "But first make sure there's nothing living in it." After Mira's house, Ela wandered aimlessly through the town until he found himself down by the wharf. He sat on the edge of the pier and stared down into the cold black water. He could not understand how Mira had trouble deciding between him and Igor. He thought she loved him. Even if she didn't love him, couldn't she see what a foul person Igor was? It was like Madame Zeroni had said. Her head was as empty as a flower pot. Some men were gathering on another dock, and he went to see what was going on. A sign read, "Deck hands wanted. Free passage to America." He had no sailing experience, but the ship's captain signed him aboard. The captain could see that Ela was a man of great strength. Not everybody could carry a full-grown pig up the side of a mountain. It wasn't until the ship had cleared the harbor and was headed out across the Atlantic that he suddenly remembered his promise to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain. He felt terrible. He wasn't afraid of the curse. He thought that it was a lot of nonsense. He felt bad because he knew Madame Zeroni had wanted to drink from the stream before she died. Zero was the smallest kid in Group D, but he was the first one to finish digging. "You're finished?" Stanley asked enviously. Zero said nothing. Stanley walked to Zero's hole and watched him measure it with his shovel. The top of his hole was perfect circle. The sides were smooth and steep. Not one dirt clod, more than necessary, had been removed from the earth. Zero pulled himself to the surface. He didn't even smile. He looked down at his perfectly dug hole, spat in it, then turned and headed back to the camp compound. "Zero's a weird dude," said Zigzag. Stanley would have laughed, but he didn't have the strength. Zigzag had to be the weirdest dude Stanley had ever seen. He had a long, skinny neck and a big round head with wild, frizzy blonde hair that stuck out in all directions. His head seemed to bob up and down on its neck like it was made on a spring. Armpit was the second one to finish digging. He also spat in his hole before heading back to camp. One by one, Stanley watched each of the boys spit in the hole and return to camp compound. Stanley kept digging. His hole was almost up to his shoulders, although it was hard to tell where ground level was because his dirt piles completely surrounded the hole. The deeper he got, the harder it was to raise the dirt up out of the hole. Once again, he realized he was going to have to move the piles. His cap was stained with blood from his hands. He felt like he was digging his own grave. In America, Ela learned to speak English. He fell in love with a woman named Sarah Miller. She could push a plow, milk a goat, and most important, think for herself. She and Ela often stayed up half the night talking and laughing together. Their life was not easy. Ela worked hard, but bad luck seemed to follow him everywhere. He always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He remembered Madame Zeroni telling him that she had a son in America. Ela was forever looking for him. He'd walk up to complete strangers and ask if they knew someone named Zeroni, or if they'd ever heard of anyone named Zeroni. No one did. Ela wasn't sure what he'd do if he ever found Madame Zeroni's son anyway. Carry him up a mountain and sing the pig lullaby to him? After his barn was struck by lightning for the third time, he told Sarah about his broken promise to Madame Zeroni. "I'm worse than a pig thief," he said. "You should leave me and find someone who isn't cursed." "I'm not leaving you," said Sarah, "but I want you to do one thing for me." "Anything," said Ela. Sarah smiled. "Sing me the pig lullaby." He sang it for her. Her eyes sparkled. "That was so pretty. What does it mean?" Ela tried his best to translate it from Latvian to English, but it wasn't the same. "It rhymes in Latvian," he told her. "I could tell," said Sarah. A year later, their child was born. Sarah named him Stanley because she noticed that Stanley was Yelnats spelled backwards. Sarah changed the words of the pig lullaby so they rhymed, and every night she sang it to little Stanley. If only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was as soft as the skies, while the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, crying to the moon, if only, if only. Stanley's hole was as deep as a shovel, but not quite wide enough at the bottom. He grimaced as he sliced off a chunk of dirt, then raised it up and flung it onto a pile. He laid his shovel back down on the bottom of his hole, and to his surprise, it fit. He rotated it and only had to chip off a few chunks of dirt here and there before he could lay it flat across the hole in every direction. He heard the water truck approaching and felt a strange sense of pride at being able to show Mr. Sir or Mr. Pendanski that he dug his first hole. He put his hands on the rim and tried to pull himself up. He couldn't do it. His arms were too weak to lift his heavy body. He used his legs to help, but he just didn't have any strength. He was trapped in his hole. It was almost funny, but he wasn't in the mood to laugh. "Stanley!" he heard Mr. Pendanski call. Using his shovel, he dug 2 footholes in the hole wall. He climbed out to see Mr. Pendanski walking over to him. "I was afraid you'd fainted," Mr. Pendanski said. "You wouldn't have been the first." "I'm finished," Stanley said, putting his blood-stained cap back on his head. "All right," said Mr. Pendanski, raising his hand for a high five, but Stanley ignored it. He didn't have the strength. Mr. Pendanski lowered his hand and looked down at Stanley's hole. Well done. You want to ride back? Stanley shook his head. I'll walk. Mr. Pendanski climbed back into the truck without filling Stanley's canteen. Stanley waited for him to drive away, then took another look at his hole. He knew it was nothing to be proud of, but he felt proud nonetheless. He sucked up his last bit of saliva and spat. That was chapters 6 through 10 of Holes. So let's do our discussion questions. For what crime was Stanley sent to Camp Green Lake? He stole some shoes, supposedly. But what really happened? What did Stanley tell us happened? They fell from the sky. He was walking down the street and these shoes literally hit him in the head. But what did the judge think? He thought Stanley was lying, didn't he? Why might X-Ray have preferred a shorter shovel? So if we remember from our first section, the shovel is how they measure their hole, right? So it's a 5-foot long shovel. 5 foot is a lot longer. I don't have space. But the shovel has to go down and it has to be the height of the shovel and the hole has to be the width all the way around of the shovel too. So if X-Ray had a shorter shovel, he would not have to dig the whole 5 feet. Why did the digging get easier for Stanley as the hole got deeper? So the dirt at the very top is hard because the sun has been kind of baking it, right? Literally baking it. And so once he got through that, so it's think about it like maybe a pie crust. So once you get through the pie crust, everything else in there is soft. So it's like a pie. Who was Ela Yelnats? Stanley's dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather who lived in Latvia. Who was Madame Zeroni? She was an older lady who was a friend of Ela's, right? She was a little bit different, but also had some pretty cool things, some thoughts. So what advice did Madame Zeroni offer Ela about Mira Menke? She said, "Don't marry that girl. She only cares about herself. She can't help you. And back then you had to help run a farm, right?" She wasn't going to be any help to Ela at all. But why did Madame Zeroni give Ela the piglet? In the end, she felt bad, didn't she? She said, "All right, just take it." Though she told him to do something with the piglet, right? What did he have to do? He had to carry the piglet up a mountain and let it drink from this special stream while singing it a song. And then, as the pig got bigger, then Ela was going to get stronger because he was carrying this pig up a mountain. And eventually, he would be able to also carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain and let her drink from the stream. What would happen if Ela didn't take Madame Zeroni up the mountain? They would be cursed, and all of his descendants after him will be cursed for all eternity, is what she said. Well, Ela ended up refusing to choose a number to win Mira's hand in marriage. So what did he do after that? He hopped on a boat and went to America. But there is one thing that he forgot. What did he forget? To take Madame Zeroni up the mountain. Ugh. Now they're cursed. What did Zero do after he finished digging his hole? He spit in it. And then walked back up to camp. I hope you have enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!